Okay, so you've got your length of thread plaited or braided. Here's one I prepared earlier, and I've also worked from this one as well. So once you've got your threads braided, what it means is that they're all neat and tidy, and you're not going to lose the ticket, so you know the number of the thread that you're working with as well. When you want to have a thread to work with, you simply go to the top and you pull out a thread. And there is a length of variegated thread ready to work with. If you do your stitching and you've got a little bit of thread left over, you can always loop it over the top of the skein once it's been plaited as well. Okay, so now we're going to start some stitching. First of all, you're going to put a knot, a nice firm knot in the end of your thread. And under the current circumstances, I strongly recommend you don't lick your thread. But if you have to, lick your thread and cut the end off. If you really struggle with threading your needle, and I'll say that this is nearly one of the hardest things you're going to do, but if you struggle with threading your needle, just have a lid, like a Vegemite, old Vegemite container lid. Put a little bit of water in it, and if you want to, maybe a bit of a paper towel so that you don't have the water going everywhere. And just put the end of your thread into the bit of water and then pull it to bring it to a sharp point. For those of you that buy my beginner's kit, you will see that in the kit you've got a little pair of embroidery scissors. Embroidery scissors are so important. They need to be sharp. They don't necessarily have to be expensive, but they do need to have a sharp blade to them. And it's always advisable to use the pair of scissors you use for threads and fabric, only, not for paper. Cut the end of the thread, and there are 2 or 3 ways of threading your needle. I've done this millions of times, so I can do it very easily. But with the pearl cotton, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to hold the cut end of the thread in between my fingers and push the needle down over that cut end. And there is my needle threaded. For those of you that get a beginner's kit, you're going to get a packet of chenille needles. Why am I giving you chenille needles? Chenille needles have a large eye, so it's going to be easier for you to thread the needle. Traditionally, we tend to work with an embroidery needle, and if you've got some at home, or if you happen to get some, make sure you have some with a large eye. You always work with a needle that's got a comfortable eye to thread, but it's not too big. In the end of your thread, put a knot. You just simply have a little knot. Now, I'm going to share with you that once you start to stitch, if you have your knot at the top of your work, but you come over here to stitch, it means that you know exactly where your knot is and you know where your excess thread is. I'm now going to share with you some very basic embroidery stitches. One of them is running. Now a running stitch simply comes up and goes down. If we really want it to be particular, you can have it of even lengths. But I want to confirm with you that embroidery today is not like it was years ago. We stitch to enjoy ourselves. We stitch to do the best that we can, but we stitch to enjoy ourselves. Running stitch can be shorter or longer. So I've basically got the same length in between these 2 stitches and the space is the same, but with these, the stitch on the surface was slightly longer than the gap. That's all okay. just stitch to make yourself happy and content, and experiment. The advantage of a running stitch is you can do curves very easily. Years ago, we would have thought that stem stitch was the best way to go, but recently I've become very comfortable using running stitch. Now, if you want to, you can come back and do another stitch in between the stitches you've just completed. So you can come back and fill in the space. And that makes it look like a continuous line. The other thing you can do is you can carefully bring the needle up from underneath a stitch. And now I'm going to whip, what we call whip. And I'm going to take the needle underneath a stitch, but not back down through underneath the fabric. So I'm running the needle underneath the stitch, and then I go to the next stitch, and the next one, and the next one, and so on. And what running will do, the whipping does, is it joins the running stitches up, and it allows you again to create curves and twists. You can even whip when there's a lot of distance in between. And look at the nice little bit of texture you get with that. It's all very acceptable, very adaptable. When you've finished doing your running stitch and the whipping, if you want to whip it, you can then at the end just go back down under one of the running stitches. The next stitch I'm going to share with you is a lazy daisy. Now this is a very, very traditional stitch. It's very easy to do. It's got a lot of flexibility. You just have to be very careful that you don't go down in the same hole you came up when you're learning. When you're more experienced, you can. But while you're learning, go down in a new hole than where the thread came up. You make a loop, and you then bring the needle up in the middle of the loop for however long you want to make the stitch, and you go down on the outside of the loop. This little stitch I'm about to do is going to keep that lazy daisy in place. Bring the needle up, make a loop, take the needle down in a new hole, bring the needle up for the length you want your stitch to be, let the loop be pulled through, and go down on the outside of the loop. Bring the needle up, take the needle down next door in a new hole, bring the needle up, oh, lost the thread, okay,